Abraham, I have to talk to you. I have three things to say. One thing is I need to sort out a couple of things that were said in this meeting. I have a very burning question that's been with me for many years, and before I do either of those, I need to tell you how grateful I am. I want to tell you just a brief synopsis of my life. I ran away when I was very, very young, shot heroin and cocaine forever, lived on the streets for all kinds of years, and experienced all kinds of things along my path. I've been free and clear and sober for 23 years. I am worth in excess net worth of over 40 million, and I am also a teacher. I am where I'm at now today because of the authors at Hay House, for sure, specifically you guys. And I want to thank Jerry and Esther for being willing, and I want to thank you, Abraham, for all your teachings and how much you've helped me in my life. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about was our meeting here today, and one of the things that I do when I teach is I like to focus on the what-isness of things and seeing it how it truly is. In other words, when you talk about Jesus seeing the person, he looks, but he sees the true health and the true well-being of the person rather than what's going on. And I think that we can always also do that with the what-isness. In other words, I think that to look at just the future and not the floorboard with the windshield is to presuppose that the what-isness is not in perfect order, and that you can absolutely be in the vortex by focusing on what is.
Those are brilliant words, and the bridge that we're all making here together today is about the making peace with what is in its perfection, which then allows your preference to evolve.
Yes.
Yes, perfectly stated.
Yes, and
in the disagreement or disapproval of what is, there's resistance that doesn't let that happen.
yes,
So it's like seeing something that you feel is threatening to you and refusing to think about it is still resistance. But being able to acknowledge it without freaking out is not resistance. That's what we're all saying, isn't it?
it is.
Yes.
It is. To go further with that, I feel like if you can see it in all perfect order, in the fact that it's bringing you from where you're at and in the future, and it's the...
Because since you are an eternally evolving being and you are where you are, then the starting point of the journey is just fine no matter what it is. Is that what you mean to say? That's what we mean to say.
It is. It's also a tracking of sorts, though. What I've found with people that I teach is that they want to feel something more substantial or tangible. And so, as many of the authors teach, your present what-isness is a mirror into how you've thought in the past. That is the circumstance of your thoughts that you've thought in the past.
Manifestation equals what your point of attraction has been.
So in order to figure out how to change necessarily, besides listening to you here today for sure and all of your teachings.
However, if you spend too much time trying to figure out how you got where you are, you keep the vibration active and you don't move on.
I agree.
And that's the thing that most of them are missing.
Yep.
Really missing.
And so it's like 5% of the time on the problem, 95% of the time on the solution, that
That's
same
a good
type
ratio.
of concept.
That's a good
So
ratio.
I'm just talking about just touching on where you're at now is relevance to your thoughts in the past, because I think we can learn from that somewhat, just not spend too much time there.
But the thing about that that is a little tricky is that you can soften all of that, because intellectually, when you're thinking about a solution which brings you to the natural consequence of acknowledging the problem, you can activate the vibration of the problem without even realizing that you did that. And where if you are not trying to think your way through it, but trying to feel your way through it, there's a much clearer distinction between feeling happy and feeling sad. There's a much clearer distinction between feeling eager and feeling paralyzed, where there's not such a clear distinction between thinking about the money I want and thinking about not having the money I want. That's muddier, where the emotion is clearer and therefore easier. It's an easier approach. We're going to take a segment of refreshment. We will begin with you when we return.
Thank
Good
you.
time for it. So among the things you wanted to talk about, you talked about something really important. Did you get to that yet?
No, Abraham, but I will immediately. Abraham, the one thing that I have not been able to come to terms with, and you've spoke about it and touched on it in several different ways. It's very important that I'm able to get all of this out first, so can you hold just until I get it out? Because I need to explain it from a couple different avenues. Because I know you've approached this subject, and believe me, I've listened to every word, I've hung on that. Even inside of Hay House and many other authors, there's always this thing that comes out that is a sentiment of nobility, and you'll understand almost immediately when I say it, but the sentiment of nobility for kind of walking away from the material items of this world. Dr. Dyer talks a lot about, and I'm not trying to pit one author against the other. I'm really interested in this, though. I need to know what you have to say about this. There's, and just paraphrasing, but the fact that you cannot come to be taught by the mystics or the enlightened masters will not reveal answers to you unless the small petty desires of this world are forgotten, or...
That may be true, but let's not call manifestations that.
And I agree with, I really agree with that.
In other words, we've talked about this to some length at different times. You live as extensions of source energy in what you have to acknowledge is a manifested environment where billions of you concur about your life experience as you vibrationally translate through your eyes and ears and nose and so on. So manifestation, there is nothing more spiritual than the materialism of this world, because there is nothing more leading edge than the manifestations that support the vibrational nature of your being. If you had not intended to experience things of a physical nature, you would have remained in the non-physical realm with the larger part of your beingness. But you've come expressly to sift through the details of this. So when we speak of manifestations, we want you to experience the manifestation. But what happens, what makes people talk against it or counsel against it, is that they've missed that piece that we've been talking about all day here today. And when they miss the piece of alignment first, then they can't control manifestations. And then they feel like they have to demonize what they cannot control, you see. So we're bridging that a bit here today as we acknowledge that the emotion is a manifestation. But we promise you, you cannot come into vibrational alignment with who you are and hold yourself without demonstrating, without all kinds of physical material things demonstrating and materializing all around you, because it is the nature of this physical environment in which you have put yourself.
Thank you.
The war between materialism and spiritualism is a misunderstood war. There are so many people who stand saying, if you care about material things, you can't care about spirit. And we want to say those who are most in alignment with who they are the most likely to experience the material world in the way they have intended. They've got it backwards, you see. And so, but we're talking about manifestations of money, manifestations of wellness, manifestations of goosebumps, manifestations of clarity, manifestations of flexibility, manifestations of relationships. We're talking about the manifestations, the in the moment deliciousness of your experience, you see. And what about, and we've been talking here today, and almost everyone has come into complete resonance with this idea of making peace with where you are. And yet, bodies of teachers not making peace with the very material world in which they are focused. Something very screwy about that, rabbit.
I agree 100%. Abraham, as a matter of fact, if people walk through my house, the first thing they think is I'm a materialist. And what I found is that I have less connection or attachment to those things than people that are struggling financially. I mean, it's weird how it's opposite. I see that probably with you and Jerry too.
Well, it's such an interesting thing that when you come into alignment with all that you are, all that you've ever wanted flows easily into your experience. Yeah. But it is the alignment that you've always been seeking, but then the other always comes. So here is the way we would interpret what many of them are trying to explain. If you put the material stuff before the alignment, then it's out of whack. If you put the alignment first, then you've got it all.
Okay, so I need to jump right into one more thing. It's been said that greed is wealth at the expense of others.
We would say greed is approaching economics from outside the vortex. We would say greed is a belief in limitedness and shortage. And when you think that the pie is only this big and you're squabbling over who gets the pieces, then that feeling of lack is what is at the basis of the word that you use as greed. But when you are in the vortex where you understand, there is an economic pie, a vibrational economic pie that is unlimited. And when you understand that pie, then there's never any reason for greed because there's no competition, because it's only you and your relationship to what you've put there, you see.
I agree with that 100%. Abraham, just one more thing, and I know you said, getting materialism after you've gotten alignment. This is similar, but I want to see your take on this. What ambition is wealth with the service of others, based on the service of others. So what I'm wondering is
Give us more about that. Ambition is what?
Ambition is wealth at the service of others, rather than greed is wealth at the expense of others. In other words, you're taking something and you're not giving back. My philosophy, and I've seen this true for my life, is the more that I give, the more people that I help, and the more people that I serve, the more that comes back to me. And it seems like that's a law, and I don't know if the service of others means that you're in alignment.
Here's what we think you're describing, that the service thing doesn't quite explain. There's offering of service is as good a word as any from inside the vortex, and there's the offering of service from outside the vortex. In other words, if I stand in your shoe, if I see that you need something, and from my awareness of your need, I offer service, there's a vibrational incongruity that gets in the way. But if I am in alignment with the resources of Source, and there's no shortage, and I see not your lack, but am inspired to co-create with you from my understanding of our abundance, then it's an entirely different thing. As Karen and Esther were walking back to the sleeping room during segment of refreshment. They rendezvoused with a wonderful man who they've known from back in the back. And he said to them, playing with them, "Girls, could you please help me with these dishes?" And both of them said, "We'd be happy to." And then he looked at Karen's name tag and said, "Oh, you're not here to work with me." And they said, "But we'd be happy to if you need a hand on something." All of them plain, neither one of them were going to wash any dishes. And then he said, "Would you like a cookie?" And both of them said, "Oh yes, that would be very nice," not realizing that the cookie was far, 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 far away from where they were. At that moment, the elevator door opened, and there was a man on the elevator who was coming up from a lower floor, who now they were inconveniencing because he was holding the door open. And they said, "Hang on, we're waiting for cookies." He said, "All right." They said, "Hang on, we're waiting for cookies." He said, "All right." They said, "Hang on, we're waiting for cookies." He said, "All right." They said, "Hang on, we're waiting for cookies." He said, "All right." They said, "Hang on, we're waiting for cookies, we're waiting for cookies, we're waiting for cookies." And then they decided not to wait for the cookies because they didn't really want the cookies. They were just wanting to be compatible, harmonic co-creators with a man who was wanting to offer them service. But what was out of whack about it? They didn't want the cookie. In other words, they weren't asking for the cookie. They were being offered something. What they wanted was to make the best use of the very brief amount of time that they had. And so they got caught up in someone who was determined to serve. And then they felt guilty because they left him. They're sure that he's standing there at the elevator with the cookies, wondering what has happened to them, you say. And so this is a world that's based upon attraction. When you don't try to answer questions that aren't being asked or solve problems that have not been presented to you, but instead you allow law of attraction to cause the rendezvous, because there is always a rendezvous between a question and an answer. There is always a rendezvous between a problem and a solution. And once you know that, then you can just get in sync with this, and it is delicious. There are a lot of people who are determined to serve. And what they often leave out of the equation is that if there is a vibrational incompatibility, it's not service, it's harassment.
And that's why alignment first.
Say again?
And that's why alignment first.
Yes. Vortex first, everything else follows.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
And so I dreamed of being here last night, and I'm here now, and I want to thank you again.
A dream is a manifestation, and when you begin dreaming, you're right on the heels of the full-blown manifestation. It's a wonderful thing.
Thank you so much.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed.